The canyon walls blazed crimson in the dying light of 1873, their ancient faces bearing witness to Sarah Mitchell's desperation. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the silver locket, her mother's only legacy, holding it toward the bearded prospector who dismounted from his dusty Mustang. Blood stained the hem of her torn dress, her feet bare and bleeding from 3 days of running through the Colorado Badlands. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking like drought-broken earth. "I haven't eaten in 4 days. This locket, it's real silver, just a piece of bread, anything." Before we continue with Sarah's story, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It truly means everything to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. Also, I'm curious, where are you listening from today? Let us know in the comments below. The man before her stood 6'3", his shoulders broad as a barn door beneath a weathered leather vest. Dust caked his dark hair, and a scar cut through his left eyebrow, a remnant of some forgotten battle. But his eyes, green as spring grass after rain, held something she hadn't seen in months: kindness. "Keep your locket, ma'am." His voice rumbled deep, touched with the soft drawl of Texas. "Name's Jacob Thornton, and silver isn't what's needed here. You are." He reached into his saddlebag and produced dried venison and a canteen. "Eat slow. Your stomach won't thank you otherwise." Sarah's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the meat. Jacob steadied her fingers with his own. Calloused, strong, but surprisingly gentle. The touch sent an unexpected warmth through her frozen limbs. "Who's hunting you?" he asked quietly, his gaze scanning the canyon rim. "My father." The words tasted like ash. "He sold me to Clayton Briggs for $300 and grazing rights. I ran the night before the wedding." She met his eyes, forcing steel into her voice, despite the terror coiling in her gut. "I'd rather die in this canyon than become that man's property." Jacob's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his stubbled cheek. "You're not property. You're a person, and you've got a right to choose your own path." He glanced at the darkening sky, then at his Mustang, a sturdy bay with intelligent eyes. "Storm's coming. There's a place nearby where we can shelter." "We? You think I'm leaving you out here alone?" He gathered his horse's reins, his tone brooking no argument. "Come on, Cisco knows the way." They walked in silence, Sarah's exhaustion making each step an act of will. The canyon narrowed, its walls pressing close as shadows deepened. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to fall, fat and cold, raising dust from the parched earth. "There," Jacob said, pointing ahead. Through the gathering darkness, Sarah saw it. A small stone chapel, half hidden by a rockfall, its wooden door weathered gray by decades of desert wind. Vines of wild roses climbed its walls, their blooms ghostly white in the gloom. The prospector and his Mustang found a lost chapel in the canyon. Jacob murmured, almost to himself. "Old Miguel told me about this place before he died. Said it was built by Spanish missionaries in the 1700s. No one's used it in 100 years. He pushed open the door, which groaned on rusted hinges. Inside, the air smelled of stone and age, but the roof held sound. A simple wooden altar stood at the far end, and broken pews lined the walls. Moonlight filtered through a cracked window, painting silver stripes across the floor. Jacob led Cisco inside. The chapel was large enough to shelter them all, and began unpacking his bedroll. You take this. I'll keep watch by the door." "Why are you helping me?" Sarah asked, her voice small in the ancient space. "You don't know me." He paused, his back to her. 3 years ago, I had a sister, Rebecca. Sweet girl, 16 years old. Our father promised her to a rancher twice her age, a cruel man with a taste for whiskey and violence. His shoulders tensed. She tried to run, didn't make it. I found her at the bottom of Widow's Gulch with a broken neck. Sarah whispered, "I made a promise that day." He turned to face her, his eyes fierce in the shadows. "No woman would suffer that fate if I could prevent it." So here we are. Rain began to hammer the roof, a deafening roar that enclosed them in their own small world. Sarah wrapped herself in the bedroll, its warmth and the scent of sage and wood smoke oddly comforting. For the first time in months, she felt something close to safe. "What were you prospecting for?" she asked after a while, needing to fill the silence with something other than her own racing thoughts. "Silver, mostly. Gold, if I'm lucky." He settled against the wall, his rifle across his knees. "Had a claim up near Leadville, but it played out. Been drifting since, looking for the next strike." "And if you don't find it?" "Then I don't. The searching's half the point anyway." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You learn a lot about yourself out here, alone, what you're made of. What matters? What matters to you?" The question hung between them, intimate in the darkness. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face for a heartbeat. The strong line of his jaw, the weariness around his eyes, the fundamental decency that radiated from him like heat from a forge. "Doing right by people," he said finally, "keeping promises, making sure folks like you don't have to trade family treasures for stale bread." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't even know if I can survive out here. I've never been on my own. My father controlled everything. Where I went, what I wore, who I spoke to. I don't know how to shoot or track or—" "Then you'll learn," Jacob interrupted gently. "If you want to, I've got time before I need to move on. I can teach you enough to get by." "Why would you do that?" "Because I see a woman worth saving. Not from the canyon or the storm. You're already saving yourself from those. I just want to make sure you've got the tools to keep going." The storm raged through the night, but Sarah slept more deeply than she had in years, lulled by the rhythmic drumming of rain and the quiet presence of the man who'd appeared when she needed him most. Morning broke clear and brilliant, the desert washed clean and gleaming. Jacob was already awake, brewing coffee over a small fire he'd built in the chapel's entryway, careful not to damage the ancient stone. "Come look at this," he said when she stirred. Behind the altar, a paler desert. Partially hidden by fallen debris was a mural. Time and weather had faded it, but the image remained hauntingly beautiful. A woman in flowing robes, her hands outstretched, surrounded by rays of golden light. Beneath her feet, desert flowers bloomed in impossible profusion. "Nuestra Señora del Desierto," Sarah read from the cracked Spanish inscription. "Our Lady of the Desert, patron saint of lost travelers," Jacob said. "Seems fitting." They spent the day cleaning the chapel, something unspoken driving them both. Sarah swept away years of dust and debris, while Jacob cleared the rockfall from the entrance. As they worked, they talked about everything and nothing. She told him about her mother's death when she was 12, how her father had grown harder and meaner with each passing year. He spoke of his childhood in Texas, of Rebecca's laugh, of the weight of promises kept and broken. "You've got a good eye for color," Jacob observed as Sarah arranged wildflowers on the altar. Desert marigolds, purple asters and the white roses from outside. "You paint?" "I used to. My mother taught me." A shadow crossed her face. "My father burned my supplies after she died. Said art was vanity, and vanity was sin." "Your father sounds like a man who confused control with righteousness." Jacob's voice was hard. "Real strength is letting people grow, not cutting them down." Over the following days, a pattern emerged. Mornings, Jacob taught her survival skills. He showed her how to read tracks in the dust, how to find water by watching where birds flew at dawn, how to start fire with flint and steel. He taught her to shoot his old revolver, standing behind her to adjust her stance, his breath warm against her ear as he murmured instructions. "Squeeze, don't pull. Let out half your breath. There, perfect." The tin can exploded off the fence post she'd set up. Sarah whooped with triumph, spinning to face him, and found his face inches from hers. His hands still rested on her shoulders. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Jacob stepped back, clearing his throat. "Good shot. You're a natural." But the air between them had changed, charged with something neither dared name. Afternoons, they continued restoring the chapel. Jacob repaired the roof, while Sarah scrubbed the floor and carefully cleaned the mural, revealing details hidden for decades. They worked in comfortable silence, occasionally broken by observations or questions. Evenings, they sat by the fire and talked until the stars wheeled overhead. Sarah found herself laughing again, really laughing, for the first time in years. Jacob had a dry wit and a gift for storytelling, spinning tales of close calls and narrow escapes that left her breathless. "Did you really jump off a cliff into a river to escape a grizzly?" she asked, eyes wide. 30 feet, straight down. Hurt like hell, and the bear just watched me from the edge like I was the stupidest thing it had ever seen. Which, to be fair, I probably was. She laughed until her sides ached, and Jacob watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something tender and pained all at once. 2 weeks passed like a fever dream. Sarah felt herself growing stronger, not just physically, but in spirit. She walked differently now, head up, shoulders back. She could hit a target at 50 yards, build a fire in under 2 minutes, and track a jackrabbit across bare rock. But beneath the growing competence lurked a knowledge neither could ignore. This couldn't last. They were living in a bubble, suspended outside normal time. Eventually, the real world would intrude. It came on a Tuesday morning. Sarah was practicing knife throwing at a tree stump when Cisco whinnied sharply. Jacob appeared from inside the chapel, his face grim, rifle in hand. Riders, 6 of them, coming up the canyon. Sarah's blood turned to ice. "My father?" "Can't tell yet. Get inside. Stay low." They watched from the chapel window as the men approached. Sarah recognized her father's massive frame on the lead horse, his face florid and furious even at a distance. Beside him rode Clayton Briggs, tall, whip-thin, with the cold eyes of a snake. 4 hired guns flanked them. "There's the ungrateful bitch," her father's voice boomed. "Thought you could hide from me, Sarah. Thought you could shame me in front of the whole territory?" Jacob stepped out of the chapel, his rifle held loosely but ready. "The lady's not interested in going with you." "Lady?" Briggs laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "That's my property you're harboring, friend. Paid good money for her." "People aren't property," Jacob said quietly, dangerously. "And she's made her choice. Suggest you respect it." Sarah's father spat. "You've got no right to interfere in family business. Prospector, hand her over and we'll let you live." No. The single word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she gripped the revolver Jacob had given her. 6 against 2. The odds were impossible. "Your funeral," Briggs said, and reached for his gun. Everything happened in a blur. Jacob's rifle cracked once, twice. 2 of the hired guns toppled from their saddles. Sarah kicked open the chapel door and fired, her shot catching the third man in the shoulder. The canyon erupted in gunfire, the thunder of it echoing off stone walls. Jacob dove behind a boulder, reloading with practiced speed. A bullet chipped stone inches from his head. Sarah fired again, keeping Briggs pinned down. Her father was circling, trying to flank them. "Go slow," Jacob shouted to her. "Don't rush your shots. It hurts our chances." "I know," she yelled back, surprising herself with her own steadiness. Fear was mare, coiling in her gut, but it didn't control her anymore. The 4th gunman made a break for the chapel. Sarah stepped into the doorway and shot him in the leg. He went down hard, screaming. Her father roared and charged on horseback, pulling his shotgun. Jacob stood, firing in one smooth motion. The shot caught her father's horse in the chest. It went down in a tangle of limbs, pinning the older man beneath it. "Please," her father gasped, his leg clearly broken. "Sarah, help me. I'm your father." She walked forward slowly, the revolver steady in her hand. "You stopped being my father the day you sold me." Briggs was the last standing. He held his hands up, backing toward his horse. "This ain't over, girl. I'll find you. I always collect what's owed." "Nothing's owed," Jacob said, emerging from cover. Blood ran from a graze along his ribs, staining his shirt crimson. "You leave now, and you leave for good. You come back, and I promise you won't leave at all. We clear?" Briggs's face twisted with rage, but he mounted up. "You'll regret this." He grabbed the reins of the remaining horses, including the ones carrying the wounded men, and spurred away down the canyon. Sarah's father lay pinned beneath his dead horse, groaning. Jacob walked over and regarded him coldly. "We'll send someone from the nearest town to fetch you. After that, you stay away from your daughter. Understood?" "You can't." "I can, and I will. Sarah's free now. Accept it or don't. Doesn't change the fact. They left him there and returned to the chapel." Inside, Sarah's hands finally began to shake, the adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. "You're hurt," she said, focusing on the blood seeping through Jacob's shirt. "Just a graze. I've had worse." "Let me look at it." He sat on one of the restored pews while she carefully peeled away his shirt. The wound wasn't deep, but it needed cleaning. She fetched water and cloth, her fingers trembling as she worked. "I could have gotten you killed," she whispered. "But you didn't. You stood your ground and fought back. I'm proud of you, Sarah." She looked up, finding his green eyes fixed on her face. The chapel suddenly felt very small, the air thick with unspoken words. "Jacob," she began, then stopped. "How did you thank someone for giving you back your life? How did you explain that somewhere between the shooting lessons and the campfire stories, between the laughter and the gunfight, you'd fallen completely and irrevocably in love?" "Sarah?" His hand came up, cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized was falling. "These past 2 weeks, they've been the best I've had in years, maybe ever. And I know I said I was just teaching you to survive, but somewhere along the way I love you," she interrupted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know it's too soon, and I know you're a drifter, and I know I'm just some runaway girl you found in a canyon. But I love you. Jacob Thornton, and I don't know what to do about it." His laugh was half sob. "Thank God, because I love you too, and I've been going out of my mind trying to figure out how to tell you without sounding like a fool." He kissed her then, gentle at first, almost reverent, then deeper as she pressed against him. His arms came around her waist, pulling her close despite his injury. She tangled her fingers in his hair, tasting sun and dust and promise. "I'll die before I hurt you," he murmured against her lips, "before I let anyone hurt you again." "I know. I trust you." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "Together?" "Together," he agreed. The word a vow. The next weeks passed in a haze of quiet joy. They made the chapel into a real home, patching holes, adding proper doors, building furniture from salvaged wood. Jacob filed a claim on the surrounding land, discovering a modest silver vein in the canyon wall that would provide steady income. Sarah began painting again, creating vibrant murals on the chapel walls, desert scenes full of life and color. She painted Jacob on Cisco, riding beneath a turquoise sky. She painted herself, no longer running, but standing tall, a rifle in one hand and wildflowers in the other. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, Jacob took her hand and led her to the altar where they'd first found the faded mural. "I'm not good with fancy words," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "and I don't have much to offer beyond hard work and a silver claim that might or might not pay out. But I love you, Sarah Mitchell. You're the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she breathed, laughing through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married a month later in the little chapel they'd restored together. A traveling preacher performed the ceremony, and a handful of prospectors and settlers from the nearest town stood as witnesses. Sarah wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, with a crown of desert flowers in her hair. Jacob wore his cleanest shirt and a look of absolute wonder. "I, Jacob Thornton, take you, Sarah Mitchell, to be my wife, to honor, cherish, and protect, to stand beside in times of plenty and hardship, to love until my last breath leaves my body. I, Sarah Mitchell, take you, Jacob Thornton, to be my husband, to honor, cherish, and stand beside, to build a life with through joy and struggle, to love as fiercely as the desert loves the rain." When they kissed, the witnesses erupted in cheers. Cisco whinnied from outside, as if adding his own approval. That night, they stood on the canyon rim, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The chapel below glowed with candlelight, a beacon in the wilderness. "Do you believe in miracles?" Sarah asked, leaning against Jacob's solid warmth. "I didn't used to," he admitted, wrapping his arms around her. But then, a prospector and his mustang found a lost chapel in the canyon, and what followed was called a miracle. "Because we found each other, Sarah. Against all odds, in the middle of nowhere, two broken people found each other and built something whole." She turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him. "Not broken anymore. Healed. Together." "Together," he echoed. And in that single word was every promise, every hope, every dream they'd build in the years to come. The chapel, once abandoned and forgotten, became known throughout the territory as the Chapel of Miracles. Travelers would stop there, leaving offerings at the altar where Sarah and Jacob had been married. Some said they'd seen the faded mural of Nuestra Señora del Desierto glowing in the darkness. Others swore they'd heard voices singing hymns when the chapel stood empty. But Sarah and Jacob knew the truth. The real miracle wasn't the chapel itself, or the desert saint, or even the silver vein that made them prosperous. The miracle was choosing hope over despair, love over fear, freedom over bondage. The miracle was two souls finding each other in the wilderness and refusing to let go. Years later, sitting on their porch as the sun set over the canyon they'd made their home, Sarah would lean against Jacob's shoulder and smile. "Tell me again," she'd say, as she had 100 times before, and he would, never tiring of the story. The prospector and his mustang found a lost chapel in the canyon, and what followed was called a miracle. "The best miracle," she'd whisper. "The only miracle that matters," he'd agree, and kiss her as the stars began to shine. The first winter came hard and fast, sweeping down from the mountains with a fury that reminded them how unforgiving the wilderness could be. Sarah stood at the chapel window, watching snow blanket the canyon in white silence, transforming the harsh desert into something ethereal and strange. "We've got enough firewood for 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we're careful," Jacob said from behind her, his arms sliding around her waist. 6 months of marriage, and the touch still sent warmth flooding through her veins. "Dried meat and beans to last until spring. We'll be fine." "I know." She leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "It's just so quiet, like the whole world is holding its breath." "Good time for painting," he suggested, with a gentle smile. Kissing the top of her head, "I cleared out that back room, made you a proper studio. Not much, but there's a window that catches the morning light." Sarah turned in his arms, studying his face. Even after months together, she sometimes couldn't believe this man was hers. "You did that for me? I'd do anything for you. You know that by now." She did know it. He proved it every day in 1,000 small ways. The coffee he made just the way she liked it, the wildflowers he brought her even when the desert offered only thorns, the way he listened when she talked about her dreams of one day opening a school for girls who'd had nowhere else to go. "I love you," she said simply, and kissed him until the cold outside ceased to matter. The winter months passed in a cocoon of intimacy. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, the outside world reduced to white silence. Sarah painted while Jacob worked the silver claim during brief breaks in the weather. Evenings, they read aloud from the books he'd ordered from Denver. Poetry, novels, technical manuals that made them both laugh at the dry language. "Listen to this," Jacob said one night, his voice dripping with mock seriousness. "The proper extraction of silver ore requires attention to particulate density and aggregate composition. Who writes like this?" "Someone who's never had to actually swing a pickaxe," Sarah suggested, grinning. "Let me see." He took the book and scanned the page. "Oh God, it gets worse. One must consider the geological matrix in which the ore is embedded." They dissolved into laughter, the sound echoing off the stone walls. These moments, the ordinary, silly, perfect moments, felt more miraculous than any treasure. But beneath the happiness lurked a shadow Sarah tried to ignore. 2 months into winter, she began feeling ill in the mornings. The smell of cooking meat turned her stomach. Her breasts felt tender, and a bone-deep exhaustion plagued her. She knew what it meant. She also knew the risks. Her own mother had died giving birth to what would have been Sarah's baby brother. The frontier had no shortage of stories about women who didn't survive childbirth, about babies born too early or too weak to weather the harsh conditions. She said nothing to Jacob at first, terrified of the worry she'd see in his eyes. But he noticed. Of course he noticed. He watched everything about her with the focus of a man who'd found something precious and refused to lose it. "Sarah," he said one morning, catching her hand as she rushed outside to be sick. "Talk to me. How long have you been feeling like this?" She met his gaze, seeing not fear but something else. Hope, wonder, and yes, concern. "About 6 weeks, I think. Jacob, I think I'm carrying our child." His face transformed, joy breaking across it like sunrise. Then, just as quickly, concern shadowed his features. Do you want this?" The question surprised her. In her father's world, what a woman wanted never mattered. But Jacob wasn't her father. He never had been. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm terrified. But yes, I want this. I want to build a family with you. A real family, where children are loved, not sold. Where girls learn they have worth beyond what men decide to pay for them." He pulled her close, his hands splaying across her still flat stomach. "Then we'll do this together. Every step. I'll send to Denver for medical books. We'll find a midwife before your time comes. And Sarah," his voice roughened with emotion, "you're going to be an amazing mother." Tears pricked her eyes. "You're already an amazing father, and the baby isn't even here yet." Winter finally broke in late March, the snow melting in rushing torrents that turned the dry canyon into a temporary river. As soon as the passes cleared, Jacob rode to the nearest town, 3 days away, and returned with a wagon full of supplies and an older Mexican woman named Rosa, who delivered half the babies in the territory. "Let me see you, mija," Rosa said, her weathered hands gentle as she examined Sarah. After a thorough inspection, she smiled. "Healthy as a horse. The baby, too. You'll do fine. But we prepare anyway, yes? Babies come when they want to, not when we're ready." Rosa stayed through the spring, teaching Sarah what to expect, what to watch for, what complications might arise. She also became a friend, regaling them with stories of her own 8 children and 23 grandchildren scattered across New Mexico and Colorado. "You have something special here," Rosa told them one evening, watching as Jacob helped Sarah up from her chair, his hand steadying her swollen belly. "I've delivered babies for 40 years, seen all kinds of marriages. But this," she gestured between them, "this is rare. You love each other, yes, but more than that, you like each other. You're partners. That's the real miracle." As Sarah's belly grew round and full, Jacob became increasingly protective. He barely let her lift anything heavier than a paintbrush. He built a proper cradle from smooth pine, sanding it until there wasn't a single rough edge. He painted it white and decorated it with tiny stars. "Our little miracle," he murmured, running his hand over the wood, "deserves something beautiful." Sarah watched him from the doorway, her heart so full it ached. This man, this strong, gentle, impossibly good man, was going to be a father. Their child would grow up knowing what she'd never had, a parent who protected without controlling, who loved without conditions, who saw them as a person worthy of respect and dignity. The baby came on a sweltering August afternoon, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Sarah was painting in her studio when the first contraction hit, a wave of pressure that stole her breath. She barely had time to call for Rosa before the pains began in earnest. "Early, but not too early," Rosa pronounced. "All business now. Jacob, boil water, lots of it. Then stay close, she'll want you here." Labor lasted 16 hours. Sarah had never known pain like this. Relentless, overwhelming, primal. But Jacob never left her side. He held her hand when she needed an anchor, wiped her face with cool cloths, whispered encouragement when she was certain she couldn't go on. "You're the strongest person I know," he told her, during a brief respite between contractions. "You survived your father, survived the canyon, survived a gunfight. You can do this. I believe in you." "I'm scared," she admitted, gripping his hand so hard she knew she'd leave bruises. "I know. I'm scared too. But we're together, remember? Whatever comes, we face it together." When the baby finally came, a squalling, red-faced, perfect little girl, Sarah wept with relief and joy. Rosa cleaned the infant and placed her in Sarah's arms. "Beautiful, mija. Just beautiful. 10 fingers, 10 toes, strong lungs. Listen to her cry." Jacob stared at his daughter with an expression of absolute wonder, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "She's perfect. Sarah, she's so perfect." "Want to hold her?" Sarah asked, exhaustion making her voice soft. He took the baby with infinite care, cradling her against his broad chest. "Hey there, little one. I'm your papa. And that amazing woman there, that's your mama. We're going to take such good care of you." The baby quieted at his voice, her tiny fist wrapping around his finger. "What should we name her?" Sarah asked. Jacob thought for a moment, then smiled. "Rebecca, after my sister, so her name lives on in someone who'll know nothing but love and freedom." "Rebecca Thornton," Sarah tested. "It's perfect." Rosa stayed another month, teaching them how to care for their daughter. Rebecca proved to be a relatively easy baby. She ate well, slept in reasonable stretches, and seemed content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes that reminded Sarah of Jacob's. But being a mother was harder than Sarah had imagined. The constant vigilance exhausted her. Every cough, every cry, every moment Rebecca seemed too warm or too cold sent Sarah's heart racing with fear. The memory of her own mother's death haunted her. What if something happened? What if she wasn't enough? Jacob found her one night, sitting by Rebecca's cradle, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong? Is she sick?" "No, she's fine. She's perfect." Sarah wiped her eyes. "I'm just terrified I'll fail her somehow. Then I'll be like my father. Controlling, harsh, breaking her spirit instead of nurturing it." Jacob knelt beside her, taking her hands. "Sarah, look at me. You are nothing like your father. Nothing. You know why? Because you worry about this. You care about being a good mother. That's already more than he ever did. But what if I make mistakes?" "Then you make mistakes. We both will. We're new at this, and we're figuring it out as we go. But that baby," he gestured to Rebecca, sleeping peacefully in her cradle, "she doesn't need perfect parents. She just needs parents who love her, who try their best, who apologize when they mess up. And Sarah, you're already doing that." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. Together, always together. As autumn painted the canyon in golds and russets, life settled into a new rhythm. Sarah painted with Rebecca, sleeping in a basket beside her easel. Jacob worked the silver claim, with his daughter strapped to his chest and a carrier Rosa had shown them how to make. They took turns, with night feedings, with diaper changes, with the 1,000 small tasks that came with a baby. One morning, Sarah woke to find Jacob gone from their bed. She followed the sound of his voice to discover him sitting on the chapel steps, Rebecca in his arms, watching the sunrise. "And that's the canyon where your mama and I first met," he was saying softly. "I was just drifting through, not looking for anything particular. Then I saw her, brave and scared and determined, and everything changed. Sometimes the best things find you when you're not even looking, little one. Remember that. Rebecca gurgled, waving her tiny fists at the sky. Sarah's heart clenched with love so fierce it was almost painful. This was what family was supposed to be. Not obligation or transaction, but choice and love and partnership. She stepped outside, and Jacob looked up with a smile that still made her breath catch. "Morning. We were just having a conversation about providence and true love." "Heavy topics for such a small person," Sarah teased, settling beside them. Never too early to start. He shifted Rebecca so Sarah could see her daughter's face, alert now, tracking the movements of birds overhead. "I want her to grow up knowing she's valued, that her thoughts matter, that she can be whatever she wants. Rancher, artist, scholar, adventurer. She has the best father in the world to teach her that," Sarah said, leaning her head on his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the desert wake up. In the distance, Cisco grazed peacefully. The chapel behind them stood solid and welcoming, its walls now covered in Sarah's vibrant murals. The silver claim provided steady income, not enough to make them rich, but sufficient for comfort and security. More importantly, they had each other. They'd built something real and lasting from the ruins of their separate pasts. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Sarah asked. "When you found me in the canyon, every day, I think about how close I came to riding past, to missing you entirely. A few minutes difference, a different path chosen, and we'd never have met." "The prospector and his mustang found a lost chapel in the canyon," Sarah quoted softly. "And what followed was called a miracle," Jacob finished. He kissed her temple, still is, every single day. Rebecca made a happy sound, and they both laughed. Their daughter, the living proof of their love, the promise of a future brighter than either had dared imagine. As the sun cleared the canyon rim, painting everything in liquid gold, Sarah felt a peace she'd never known before. She'd been lost, broken, terrified, but she'd survived. More than that, she'd thrived. And this was just the beginning. The years that followed brought both joy and challenge in equal measure. Rebecca grew into a bright, curious child who followed Jacob everywhere, asking endless questions about rocks and animals and stars. By age 3, she could identify a dozen different types of ore and recite the names of all the constellations. "She's got your brain," Jacob told Sarah proudly, after Rebecca explained to a visiting prospector exactly why his claim probably wouldn't pan out based on the geological composition he described. "And your confidence," Sarah countered, watching their daughter march fearlessly through the canyon, stick sword in hand, declaring herself the protector of the realm. But their happiness was tested when Rebecca was 4. A fever swept through the territory that autumn, claiming dozens of lives. Rebecca fell ill so quickly it terrified them, burning hot one moment, shivering uncontrollably the next. For 5 days, Sarah and Jacob took turns sitting beside their daughter's bed, wiping her down with cool water, forcing liquids when she could take them, praying to every god they could name. "Please," Sarah whispered on the 3rd night, her hands clasped so tight her nails cut into her palms. "Please don't take her. I'll do anything. Just let her live." Jacob pulled her against him, his own face haggard with fear and exhaustion. "She's strong. Like her mother, she'll fight this." But his voice shook, betraying his terror. On the 6th day, Rebecca's fever finally broke. She opened her eyes, clear now, no longer glazed with illness, and said in a hoarse whisper, "Papa, I'm thirsty." Jacob actually sobbed, scooping her into his arms. "Thank God. Thank God." Sarah collapsed into a chair, every muscle in her body trembling with relief so profound it hurt. They'd come so close to losing her, so impossibly close. As Rebecca slowly recovered, Sarah and Jacob held each other in the darkness and acknowledged the truth neither wanted to speak. The frontier was dangerous, especially for children. Disease, accident, animal attacks, 100 threats lurked just beyond their door. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Sarah asked quietly. "Going somewhere with doctors, schools, other children?" Jacob was silent for a long time. "I think about it," he admitted, "especially after this week. But Sarah, this is our home. We built this together. The chapel, the claim, everything. I don't want to leave unless you do." "I don't know what I want," she confessed. "I love it here, but I'm so tired of being afraid, of watching her play and thinking about all the ways we could lose her." "Then we stay for now, but we prepare. I'll build up our savings. If we decide to move to Denver or San Francisco or wherever, we'll have the means to do it right. But Sarah," he turned to face her in the darkness, "wherever we go together. This family, this life we've built, that's what matters, not the place." She kissed him, tasting salt, tears from both of them. Together, always. Rebecca recovered fully, though the experience left its mark on all of them. Sarah found herself watching her daughter with an intensity bordering on obsessive, counting every breath, cataloging every movement. Jacob threw himself into making their home as safe as possible, building higher fences, stocking more medicine, even constructing a small schoolhouse attached to the chapel where he began teaching Rebecca to read and write. "If we can't go to civilization, we'll bring civilization here," he declared, unveiling the shelves full of books he'd ordered. Geography, mathematics, literature, science, everything a growing mind might need. Sarah resumed her painting with new purpose. She documented their life in vivid detail. Rebecca learning to ride, Rebecca helping Jacob in the silver claim, Rebecca painting her own pictures with more enthusiasm than skill. These moments, captured in pigment and canvas, felt like insurance against loss. Even if something happened, they'd have proof of this beautiful, improbable life they'd created. One afternoon, Sarah was teaching Rebecca letters when she heard horses approaching. Her hand instinctively went to the rifle Jacob insisted she keep close, her body tensing with remembered fear. But these weren't her father's men or Clayton Briggs's thugs. Instead, 3 women dismounted, road-worn, exhausted, one with a black eye and split lip. "Please," the oldest said, her voice breaking, "we heard there was a woman here. Someone who'd run from a bad situation and survived. We need help." Sarah's heart clenched. She saw herself in their desperate faces, the fear, the shame, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would care enough to help. "You're safe here," she said firmly. "Come inside. We'll figure this out together." Jacob arrived home to find their chapel transformed into a temporary refuge. The 3 women, Martha, escaping a violent husband, Lily, sold by her family to a brothel owner, and Catherine, a widow being forced to marry her husband's brother, sat around the table while Sarah distributed food and water. He met Sarah's eyes across the room, seeing the question there. They'd built this life for themselves. Did they want to complicate it by helping others? His answer came without hesitation. Welcome. Stay as long as you need. Tomorrow, we'll figure out where you want to go and how to get you there safely. Martha started crying. You don't even know us. No, Jacob agreed. Over the following weeks, they helped the three women find their footing. Martha decided to head north to Montana, where she had a cousin who ran a boarding house. Lily, who'd always dreamed of San Francisco, took the money they gave her and boarded a stage heading west. Catherine, surprisingly, chose to stay. She'd fallen in love with the canyon and asked if she could build a cabin nearby and start a small farm. I've been controlled my whole life, she told Sarah. First my father, then my husband, then his brother. For once, I want to make my own choice about where I live and how I spend my days. Then stay, Sarah said. Build your cabin. Build your life. We'll help however we can. What started as one emergency became a pattern. Word spread, quietly, through networks of women helping women, about the chapel in the canyon where runaways could find shelter. Over the next year, a dozen women passed through, each with their own story of escape and survival. Some stayed only a night or two before moving on. Others, like Catherine, put down roots. Slowly, a small community formed around the chapel. Women who'd chosen freedom over security, who'd risked everything for the chance to live on their own terms. Sarah found her calling in this accidental sanctuary. She taught the women to read and write, to shoot and track, to survive independently. Some discovered they had talents for farming, others for business or crafts. The canyon, once so isolated and lonely, filled with life and purpose. Rebecca grew up surrounded by women of remarkable strength and resilience. She learned that family wasn't just blood, it was choice and commitment. She learned that courage wore 1,000 different faces. She learned that home was something you were given, not something you were given. On Rebecca's 5th birthday, they held a celebration at the chapel. 15 women, residents and friends, gathered to shower the little girl with handmade gifts and laughter. Rosa had traveled from town for the occasion, bringing her famous dulce de leche cake. Look what you've built here, mija, Rosa told Sarah, surveying the scene. Not just a home, a community, a place where broken things become whole. Sarah watched Jacob swinging Rebecca in circles, while the little girl shrieked with laughter. She watched Catherine teaching 2 newer arrivals how to plant corn. She watched women who'd arrived beaten and terrified, now laughing freely, building lives they'd never thought possible. We got lucky, Sarah said. The chapel, the silver claim, finding each other, all luck. Luck? Rosa laughed. No, mija. This is faith made visible. You two believed broken people could heal, so you made a place where healing was possible. That's not luck. That's love and hard work and courage. As the sun set and the celebration moved inside, Sarah found herself back at the chapel entrance, where Jacob had first offered her food instead of taking her locket. The memory felt both distant and immediate. She was still that desperate woman, but she was also so much more. Mama, Rebecca called from inside, come help me blow out my candles. Sarah smiled and turned back to the warmth and light, to the family she'd built and the community she'd helped create. The prospector and his mustang had found a lost chapel in the canyon. What followed wasn't just a miracle. It was a revelation that would echo through generations. And the story wasn't finished. Not even close. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home? During your commute? Or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Sarah and Jacob's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.